What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy Show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, October 23rd, and we are live. So, welcome to everyone tuning in. Say hi in the chat. Drop your questions. We got a lot to talk about. I hope it was a fantastic fantasy week for you guys, even though it might have been a complete nightmare from an injury perspective. I was bit by the injury bug. Oh my gosh. This season has been insane. But the good news is that they've kept it entertaining for us with all these wide receiver trades as a result. So hey, we take the good and the bad at the same time. But that's what I want to talk about this week. As I'm taking your questions live, I also want to talk about all of these wide receiver trades. That is the topic of this week. We'll talk about the newest trade of DeAndre Hopkins. We will talk about, we'll recap last week's trades. How did they do? We know the trades, Davante Adams and Amari Cooper. How did it fare and what can we expect moving forward? And then we'll talk about the potential trade that is on the board with Cooper Kupp. All right, let's dive in. Let's start off with the new fun one here. We'll talk about the DeAndre Hopkins trade, and then as you guys are dropping questions, we'll go ahead and answer some of those. But starting off with the DeAndre Hopkins trade, this one is interesting because it is tough to gauge exactly what is the result of playing for the Tennessee Titans versus DeAndre Hopkins being 32 years old. That's a major issue. He's not a spring chicken, unfortunately. So there is some up and down there. It's a little bit different than some of these other traits here. And part of the issue is when you look at his time on the field, he actually hasn't really been heavily utilized. In the past, when we look at DeAndre Hopkins, you see strong snap counts, and I guess, the addition of Calvin Ridley does make things slightly adjust, but not to the point where he was seeing below 50% of snaps prior to the Titans bye week. Now, after the bye week, they came out and he was more heavily utilized, and maybe that was because they were wanting to showcase him because of the potential trade there. So that's a possibility. But his utilization early in the season was very low. So there's not a lot for us to really, really work off here, unfortunately. Now, when we're looking at expectations for him in this Kansas City offense, we know the exact role that they want him to fill. Now, Hopkins is a very versatile receiver. He can play all over the field, but we know that they need something to fill that Rashee Rice role. That's what they were trying to have Juju do. And Juju, to his credit, he was successful for that 1 week that he could stay healthy. But unfortunately, that doesn't really bode well for him. So bringing in DeAndre Hopkins to fill that Rashee Rice role. And he should thrive in that role. He can do it very well. It'll be a high volume usage. Targets will be there. Touchdown opportunities. There's really no downside here. So this is kind of a quick one for us to talk about because there's nothing controversial here. There's nothing but upside here for DeAndre Hopkins because there was nothing but downside for him in the Tennessee Titans offense. Now, looking at last season for Hopkins, he was actually fairly productive considering how much of a disaster of a year it was with the Titans. He had over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. There's still something left in the tank here. And maybe that early season limitations that they had in terms of him not playing a significant amount of snaps, maybe that helps him in his older age and helps him keep a high level of play for the back half of the season with Kansas City. So maybe all of this kind of benefited him here. So I'm not particularly mad at it here. This is good. Good for anybody who has DeAndre Hopkins. I tell you guys, in my favorite dynasty league, I have a home dynasty league. It's my favorite league. It's my longest dynasty league. It's with my brother and all of his friends. And I immediately, that's the first place I went to look because that's a place where I cared. Like, who has DeAndre Hopkins in that league? And of course, the guy who is in first place, who has not been hit aggressively with injury bugs, who has been, blessed to have the health of J.K. Dobbins and James Conner. It just has been like on a roll. He's got DeAndre Hopkins. It always turns out that way, right? But hopefully it works out from a fantasy perspective and for everybody. And then also for the Kansas City Chiefs. So not that they're struggling, right? They're winning, but obviously they want to make that solidify that receiving core for their Super Bowl push because it's never a playoff push for them. It is a Super Bowl push for them. Let's take some questions before we do talk the other trades here. I figured we would talk recapping the Davante Adams and Amari Cooper trades. I already saw some comments here regarding regarding Aaron Rodgers and how it's not his fault. It's never his fault. So yeah, we'll have some fun talking with that one. But let's take some comments here. Let's see. Cooper Kupp and Higgins for Tyreek Hill. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I know you're probably concerned with the risk to the potential trade, and we'll talk. And actually, that kind of dovetails into us talking about the potential Cooper Kupp trade here. So I know there's some risk in terms of being worried about trading Cooper Kupp because there are some nasty landing spots for him, unfortunately. But both him and T. Higgins for Hill, it feels like a lot, especially when, yes, we are getting Tua back, but man, be very careful. Be very, very careful, because when we're looking at Tua coming back, this would not be the first time where he came back from a concussion in season. And it didn't really bode very well. So just be aware, Tua coming back immediately boosts production for all of those assets in the Miami offense, right? Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, yay, my goodness. I'm ready for Jalen Waddle shares to rise up again. The run game is going to greatly benefit here as well. So we'll get Devon Achane back on the table. But the problem here is that, for how long? It's a risk, unfortunately. So that's a lot to give up, especially when we talk about my potential favorite landing spot in a second here for Cooper Kupp in Tampa Bay. I'm crossing my fingers that it's going to happen here. And if that happens, then you will have given up the entire farm for Tyreek Hill. So be careful of that. Thank you, Best Ball on Call. Appreciate it. They made a comment, appreciate the work you're putting in this season, keeping us ahead of the game. I appreciate that. I love the feedback, guys, because that's the beauty of this is like, this is obviously my favorite job that I've ever had, but I love this because there's literally no negative to the work that I do. It's hard, but every day get up and I get to look at football stats, come up with football content, talk about football, tweet about football, do football show. It's exciting. So I love this work, and I appreciate that you guys love it as well, because all I want to do is help you guys win. Like that's literally my main concern. I love my fantasy teams. I have my favorites and stuff that I want to succeed. But at the end of the day, on Sunday, I'm not gonna lie. If my fantasy teams are doing bad, I am sad. But more importantly, if my takes were correct, my rankings were correct, and I answered your questions correct, that's what makes me happy. So yeah, I'm that person. Let's take some more questions here from Jake Austin. Dak or Geno? I go back and forth on this one. I'm not going to lie. So both of these guys are dealing with injury issues to their well, no, not for Dak, but Geno to the injury core, to the receiving core. We've got Geno more than likely not going to have DK Metcalf, but the good news there for him is that JSN and Tyler Lockett are about as competent that you can get as a 1-2 duo. If DK is out, more than likely it's looking that way because he's week to week. Now, granted, DK is a beast. How many times have we seen DK get injured in something that would keep a normal human out for 4 weeks, and DK doesn't miss a beat? He's built different, right? So honestly, we could see him this week, but I prefer Geno. The volume has been there for Geno consistently. It wasn't there last week. That is a concern. So we do get worried about this. Is a bad matchup against Buffalo. Dak doesn't have a fantastic matchup either, and it's really difficult to trust him overall. So I lean towards going with Geno. It's super close, but Geno is my preference there. Let's see. Just traded DK for Kittle. That's a fair trade because honestly, I think, obviously the thing that we know about the 49ers offense, when one person goes down, the other two thrive. So Brandon Ayuk out for the season. Deebo Samuel and Kittle will eat for the rest of the season. Kittle is dealing with an injury. It's day to day. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal. I'm not considering it a big deal. We don't know exactly when Deebo will be back. I don't know if you guys saw the video of the little kid. That was the most adorable video that I have ever seen because it was like, I get his pain, and I love seeing a child like that obsessed with fantasy football. Get them right on track. Get them on the right track young. We're fantasy football people. Get your kids on the right track young. I'm trying to get mine into it. They're like a little stubborn right now. My oldest son loves soccer, so I might have to care a little bit more about Messi and all that, but I'll get him on the right track here. But yeah, Kittle, I think rest of season is fantastic. Overall tight end one, rest of season makes just way too much sense for him. So that's a fair trade, especially when you look at Seattle and the way that they have been spreading the ball around and that receiving core. That offense seems pretty consistent in terms of their particular goals. So I lean that direction that DK is going to, he has a ceiling, but often it's just going to be very mid. And we don't know what this injury is. So I like that trade for you. Thoughts on Ricky Pearsall? I love this question. I'm writing an article right now. Every Thursday I have a make or break article come out, and one of my make or break players is Ricky Pearsall and Jauan Jennings, of course. But Ricky Pearsall is interesting because when you look at this, you would think coming off of IR, coming off of obviously a serious situation with a gunshot injury, you would think that there would have been potentially easing him in. He's a rookie. Not the case. He played the highest amount of snaps in the offense of any of the receivers. He ran the most routes of any of the receivers. Them using him in that way immediately right there, that told me something. They trust Ricky Pearsall. They believe in him. That's their first round pick right there. So Ricky Pearsall, rest of season with Brandon Ayuk out, I think the upside is extremely high for him. For this week, I am a little bit on the fence because I think a lot of it hinges on Debo. Because ultimately, when we're looking at Ricky Pearsall and the way that he stepped up in that receiving core last week, that was without Jauan Jennings. And we know that Jauan Jennings can step up and be a major part of this offense. So if Debo is not playing this week, then I feel super comfortable starting Ricky Pearsall, to be quite frank. The targets were there. The usage was there. I trust a rookie in this situation just because of the level of upside that I believe he has and the trust that he has within this offense. If Debo is playing, that puts us in a weird position where we don't know what this looks like with Ricky and Jauan playing together and who ultimately has the preference there. I can't give you an answer there. I don't know for sure which one has the edge over the other. So if Debo is out this week, then I feel comfortable with both Ricky and Jauan. If Debo manages to make it back, then I personally lean towards Jauan just because we've got that known and that trust and that ceiling for him. And yeah, I mean, Debo said he was okay, but quite frankly, okay, you're out of the hospital, you're okay. But I'm on the fence in terms of whether I think that he will come out and play this, whether or not he'll come out and play this weekend. I mean, it just seems like you would logically give him a week to recover because that was like fluid in the lungs is serious. I know he was sick. It's crazy that he even tried to gut it out with pneumonia. Like, man, we can't criticize him anymore because the fact that he even gave it a go, that's fantastic. So yeah. And Jauan's could be out too, so we got to watch him. Out last week, seems like he's trending towards playing this week, but we don't know for sure. So Ricky could absolutely be the move here if this kind of falls into the right situation for him. If we get both Debo and Jauan out, I just want to give it a week. I just want to give it a week just to see who they trust more because we know that Kyle Shanahan really, really does love Jauan Jennings. The upside is huge for him. So we got to see there. But I trust him. I trust Ricky. It was fantastic to see that level of production out of him. So even if you're not starting him this week, if for some reason he made it through waiver wires, yeah, 100% needs to be on rosters. Bo Nix or Dak this week. I am still starting Dak. I got a lot of Bo Nix questions earlier. I was live earlier on Yahoo's social media accounts, and we got a decent amount of Bo Nix questions. I get it. I am the way that I answered this is that I am starting Dak over Bo Nix, but Bo Nix is not a bad play this week. If I were playing DFS, in making a lineup right now, Bo Nix would absolutely be someone that I would be targeting in my lineups. Just because the matchup is good. Think he should get good production on the ground as well. Offense has been flowing, so this is a good opportunity for him to step up. Squad this week, Hurts. Bryce. Oh, I think you're just saying what it is. Hurts, Brees, Kyron, St. Brown, Higgins, Ferguson, Achane, Jawan Jennings. Yeah, that's a super squad. If Jennings is out, that is a super squad. Is starting Geno Smith good? It's not a good matchup, honestly, but I'm okay with it. We're still starting him. The volume has been there. Last week was kind of a little bit of a weird blip, but in general, he's been a very high volume. Last week was weird. It should have been a much higher volume opportunity for him, but they just didn't have to do it. Start one: Wan'Dale, Tracy, Bigsby, or McMillan. I lean towards Bigsby. So when I'm looking at this matchup between Jacksonville and Green Bay obviously typically is very vulnerable on the ground. Now, that said, we still have to have a game script where Jacksonville is able to keep up with Green Bay's offense. Green Bay should be able to take advantage of that Jacksonville defense through the air. We don't want to get in a situation where they are playing from behind, and then that's where things get very shaky with Tank Bigsby, and they start to utilize D'Ernest Johnson because they don't trust Tank Bigsby in the pass game, which is just for me, right? I get that you have to earn trust, but Bigsby is so clearly the better back, and these game situations that script him out are just not ideal for Jacksonville, not even just from a fantasy perspective. But I still am gutting it out with Bigsby. I think Jacksonville should be able to keep it close enough, especially if they lead on the ground with Bigsby and commit to the run is the best way to attack Green Bay. I think it'll stay close enough to where it'll be okay for sure. So Bigsby is the one that I lean towards. Let's get back to the trades. Let's do a quick recap here of the trades, and then I'm sorry. We got to do a little commercial break here. We got to do a little bit of a commercial break here. I got off track and we're talking, and I am way past due on our ads. So over here on YouTube and Twitter, we're going to hear a quick little word from our sponsors. And we'll be right back after this.
Oh, every week I'm answering these start-sit questions on Sunday morning. I go to the weekly rankings on playerprofiler.com just to make sure that my instincts are correct, and sometimes they're not. And guess what? More often than not, I go with the projections. You may not feel great about starting Daniel Jones or Wan'Dale Robinson, but the projections say, hey, that's the move. It may not feel right, but you use those projections to get it right. That's the power of the Player Profiler system. It's Evan Ringler, it's Bradley Stalder, it's Theo Greminger, of course, it's Billy Muzio making these rankings possible. The season rankings, so you know who to pick up, who to trade for. The dynasty rankings are part of this. The offensive line rankings from Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. Then we get our cornerback rankings, which show which corners are matched up with which wide receivers. And now, in collaboration with the IDP show, we have IDP rankings. Did you know that? Did you? So go to playerprofiler.com, use promo code PODFATHER. Get you 25% off the player rankings package right now at playerprofiler.com. Enjoy!
All right, we are back. We'll do a couple more questions here, and then we'll do a quick recap of the Davante Adams and Amari Cooper performances from week 7, how that trade worked out for these, for everybody. We'll answer some questions here. Let me get this defense question here. It is the Lions, Texans, or Baltimore DST this week. I lean towards Baltimore. I've been on the fence with this one in terms of Baltimore's defense. I've kind of been moving them up and down in rankings just because it's a weird situation where we get Jameis Winston starting. So we know there's going to be an increase in volume. Like, this is not going to be a layup matchup. Jameis will go out there and throw touchdowns, but Jameis will also go out there and throw interceptions. So turnovers happening. I'm okay with starting the Baltimore Ravens defense. They're a top 10 defense for me because if the turnovers are there, I think we'll be perfectly fine. Trade Harrison for Davante. I don't know if I would do that one. I am a little bit concerned for the Jets offense. And actually, let's kind of transition right into that one and talk about how Davante performed in his debut with the Jets. It was a disaster. Not specifically for Davante, although it was not good for Davante, but for the Jets as a whole, this was a hot mess. And quite frankly, like in terms of the podcast, I wanted to make this my main story for the week, the cover story, the thumbnail and whatnot. But considering the fact that I've done that 2 weeks in a row, at some point it feels like I'm just being a bitter Packers fan at picking on Aaron Rodgers, and that's not the case. He's had it coming. But looking at what happened this weekend, unfortunately, the defense has been abysmal since firing Robert Saleh. The offensive problems, and that's why the trade as a whole, the firing of Robert Saleh just was like so strange to me, because you fired the defensive minded head coach, right? And we know that the offense was being run by Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett. That's where the problem was. Your defense didn't have any issues. Your offense had a ton of problems. You keep the offense essentially as is, right? You adjust play calling and say, okay, well, Hackett is going to step back and he's not going to call plays. We're going to have somebody else do it. But at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers is still the one that's in charge of that offense. So you really didn't change anything, because no one is going to come in and adjust play calling and really take away and transition from what Aaron Rodgers wants to do. So you really didn't change anything. You add Davante Adams, and obviously it just didn't make a significant difference. Aaron Rodgers is still throwing interceptions. Sometimes it's not his fault. Garrett Wilson, sometimes it was your fault, unfortunately. He's frustrated. Davante got the same number of targets as Garrett Wilson, 9. The pass volume was increased. Run volume was down slightly, which is not ideal. I think the Jets should be leaning on the ground game, but they're not going to do that because Aaron wants to throw the ball and prove a point. But Breece Hall was the big winner here for me. Dump offs were good for him. Goal line opportunities, finally got that. That had been something that had plagued him. So it was a good opportunity for him. So overall, the Davante Adams trade just didn't really move the needle for me. He played, he wasn't limited, saw significant targets. This is the offense as it is. We're clearly getting a 1A, 1B situation with him and Garrett Wilson. And it is possible that Wilson just outperforms him. But the favoritism right there is still going to lean towards Davante Adams. So this can continue to be more of a hot mess offense, unfortunately. But I will say this in their defense. When I looked at the Jets schedule moving forward, and this had a lot to do in terms of how I, evaluated the trade for them and the offense moving forward, there was literally 2 matchups on the schedule that were going to be difficult, and everything else was kind of going to be not a layup, but a very advantageous situation for the Jets offense. This was one of them. So this was not a good matchup. I don't feel like this is the best thing to judge them off of. Obviously, to judge them off of whether or not they could be a playoff contender, clearly not. If you're struggling this way against Pittsburgh, who is in fact a playoff contender, you cannot compete. You have to make a lot of adjustments to your offense for you to even think about that happening, unfortunately. I don't see that happening. So with that said, we look towards the future and the matchups here. And there are some good matchups where there will be volume for him. So there's still going to be usability out of both Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams. They can still be wide receiver 2s. Their ceiling is going to be capped by the fact that you never know which one of them is really going to get the touchdown opportunity, which one of them is going to have the higher upside. It, again, just really depends on Rodgers' preference here and him being a little bit more pass happy. But overall, the introduction and the good part about it is that the volume was there for Davante Adams. So clearly him being a primary target in this offense is the reality. At the same time, it looks terrible. And you don't see exactly how it is going to change and trend in a positive direction here. Yeah, I'm going to show this comment here from somebody saying, don't make me get started with Aaron. Yeah, caused 3 losses for the Jets, 2 games in fantasy. God damn him. Yeah, that is exactly why I have, and I'm not bragging about this. I got no shares of the Jets this season, just because while I love Garrett Wilson and, was hopeful for the opportunities for him here, man, I just can't trust Aaron Rodgers. Just can't trust him at all. Sad situation here. Let's get back to some questions and then we'll talk about a better trade, a recap, which was Amari Cooper. So let's do a couple questions here. I need Puka or Nico to come back ASAP. I have 2 wide receivers and 1 wide receiver / tight end. London, Addison, Mooney, McBride. Yeah, the problem for you is that you've got Addison and Mooney, who are very similar in the fact that there's obviously massive high ceilings for them. And ironically, both playing in an offshoot of Sean McVay systems. So the wide receiver too, very similar guys here, high upside. And obviously the little more talent upside for Addison, but volatility there. So yeah, I feel you on that one. I don't have Daniels this week, so I have to rely on the waiver wire. Cousins, Goff, Darnold, Maye, or Anthony Richardson. I don't like the matchup for Maye. I do kind of trust him to gut it through, right? But at the same time, because I don't like the matchup and he is a rookie, I get a little bit concerned here. Anthony Richardson has lost my trust completely. I've tried to remain positive about it. Unfortunately, it's just not working out in his favor. So it comes down to Cousins, Goff, and Darnold. And when I'm looking at those guys in my rankings, the way that I have them is I've got Cousins at QB7 because I love the matchup with Tampa Bay. Goff, I have at QB 15. Honestly, I could move him up a little bit, but it's literally just because the guys above him have far better matchups. Tennessee's matchup has obviously been up and down. It's not a fantastic situation. They're beatable, but they can stop you through the air. So that one is a little bit concerning there. So he's a little bit further back. And then the third one that you had was Darnold. And Darnold I have at QB8. I like this matchup here. But again, Thursday night games, I prefer to lean towards Kirk Cousins against Tampa Bay. I can absolutely see him lighting up that defense. Last week was a little bit disappointing, obviously, because they were able to, lean on the run game. The matchup, the game as a whole didn't work out. But I like this for a nice bounce back situation for Kirk Cousins. So Kirk is the one that I would play. I think this is one of those weeks where he could have that overall QB1 upside again for sure. Cooper, Wilson, or Brian Thomas Jr. Oh, you're testing me on this one because Brian Thomas Jr. Has been my boy all season long. But Cooper Kupp coming back here, it's tough not to play him. It's so tough not to play him. Again, you get kind of worried because you worry about any potential limitations. Minnesota's defense has been difficult, but you have been able to put up volume on them. And this is a good matchup here. Very similar systems with Minnesota versus the LA Rams. So I do expect volume there. So I lean towards Cooper Kupp. Oh, wait, I'm realizing you might mean Amari Cooper. Oh, I don't know if you mean Amari Cooper or Cooper Kupp. Sorry, I read that as Cooper Kupp. If it's Cooper Kupp, I lean towards Cooper Kupp. If it's Amari Cooper, I do have Brian Thomas one spot higher than Amari Cooper. And honestly, that one could switch back and forth. I feel like, and I know I'm being bullish on that. I know I'm ranked higher than most analysts. I can actually check the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings. Oh, I might not be bullish. No, actually, I'm not. That's right on par with ECR. No, I'm kind of shocked. I thought he would have been a little bit lower ranked given the matchup there. So no, considering that that is on ECR and I'm not being bullish there, I lean towards being okay with Brian Thomas there over Amari Cooper, assuming that's Amari Cooper. Brian Thomas Jr. or Swift. I lean towards Brian Thomas Jr. on this one. This is such a good matchup for Swift, but Washington's defense has actually they've pulled it together recently. They've got it pulled together a little bit over there. Defensive minded head coach there. Youth, I think they're, just getting better and better as the season goes on. So as we look at them and been thinking like, okay, this is a little bit of a layup matchup here. I think Washington's defense is becoming less and less of a layup matchup for teams. So just kind of watch that one there. I also feel like this is one that could lean more towards both teams passing aggressively through the air. even though that's not the best way to attack. Assuming we get Jaden Daniels back here, we don't know for sure. Him sitting out Wednesday, not massively concerned. Need to obviously see those Thursday practice reports are the real thing. But I kind of lean towards Brian Thomas Jr. on that one. Jaden Reed for James Cook. I would not do that. I'm concerned about James Cook moving forward. I think I talked about it a little bit earlier in someone's question, but really the issue for me is that I can see where there's obviously going to be more goal line opportunities with the offense flowing much better with the addition of Amari Cooper. At the same time, we're going to see an uptick of volume through the air. We're going to continue to see Josh Allen on the ground, right, as he becomes more comfortable in this new offense that is clicking. And we've also got the presence of Ray Davis kind of slipping in there as well. He got a touchdown, so I think they like Ray Davis. They don't want to James Cook is not a guy that they want to massively overload as a 3-down back, every single snap kind of guy. So we'll continue to see the presence of Ray Davis in there, and it's just going to be a little thorn in the side. James Cook will still be a fine RB2, mid-tier RB2, but I think that top 10 upside is really gone from him. Top 5 upside is just really unrealistic. Jaden Reed can still have that top 5 upside. Green Bay has been spreading the ball around a lot, and we've got some couple of struggle games from Reed recently, but I still prefer Jaden Reed to James Cook. Trade Kyron for Chuba /Hunt/Pacheco. I have Brooks on IR. If you're the one giving up Kyron, I mean, yeah, I could do that. The problem that you have here is that this might end up being you trade away a top 5 back for 2 low end for 2 low end, well, technically for 4 low end RB2s, because there's a possibility when Jonathan Brooks does come back, right? And that's what's happening here. I think that they're going to ease him in and still give the majority of workload to Chuba, but there might be enough in there to just really take the cap off that we've been enjoying. He's had that massive upside. He's been highly efficient, but Brooks coming in there and getting some involvement might make things just a little bit shaky and kind of push him back into that low-end RB2 territory. And then with Hunt and Pacheco, if Pacheco does come back, and I am still a little bit skeptical on that just because, again, I understand the timeline on that, but we have to remember the Chiefs are clearly winning their division. The Chiefs are the favorite for having the overall, number 1 seed. So if they don't feel like they have to push Pacheco back, they can save him for the playoffs. I would not be shocked if that happened, which would be good for Hunt, right? But if they don't do that, then you get maybe this muddied situation where they're splitting carries between Pacheco and Hunt, trying to keep Pacheco fresh. And then you've given up the upside for Kyron. So if you're struggling and you're not deep at running back, I'm okay with you making that trade if you just need to get pure volume. But do realize that I don't think any of those guys have the same upside as Kyron as the season moves on, because you get into a messed up committee situation with both teams. So just beware. That's what could happen. Get a little bit concerned there. I love seeing people in the chat answering each other's questions. That's wonderful. Thank you, because I know I miss a lot of questions here. Need an RB. Who do you think I can get for Amari Cooper? Yeah, this is the perfect time to trade him. The upside is high, people believe. I mean, looking at Amari Cooper, let's I think you can get probably a mid-tier RB1, because remember, people are still going to naturally be, or mid-tier RB2, people are still going to be naturally concerned about volatility for Amari Cooper. So in terms of where you're looking to target, maybe target a guy like Aaron Jones, who obviously has that massive RB1 upside, but is, viewed typically as an RB2. You could trade for someone like that. Maybe you trade for an Alvin Kamara, would be a nice one. A little sketchy offensive situation, but at some point we are going to have Derek Carr back in the near future, maybe next week. Sounds like that might be where the leaning is, which would obviously be a massive benefit for Alvin Kamara as well. So those are the kind of guys that I would trade for. Maybe a Brian Robinson might also be someone that I would look at. Those guys that are RB2s, but have that clear RB1 upside in the right situation. But Amari Cooper, this is an excellent time to trade him, because what he his utilization in the Bills offense in this first week, let's talk about it and recap there. First of all, just him, like, now bear in mind, Amari did not play that much. He played less than 50% of snaps, less than 40% of snaps. He only, the Bills ran a total of 55 offensive snaps. He was only on the field for 19 of them. So he was not that utilized. They eased him in here. He ran 12 routes and had 5 targets. So what that means is that essentially when they put him on the field, it was specific plays where they were playing him with purpose. He was not out there to run sprints, run around the field, and just be present. He was out there to catch the ball, to be targeted. So they had clear reason for him being out there. Now, when we're looking at the way he immediately stepped in and the positive direction for this entire offense as a whole, he led all Bills pass catchers, just barely edging out Keon Coleman with 14.6 fantasy points, half PPR. I can't remember if I wrote that as half PPR or not. And then this was a fantastic sign. Even more so the way that his presence just elevated the group as a whole. I understand that, Cooper wasn't on the field for a significant amount of Keon Coleman's targets, but they were on the field at the same time. And the veteran leadership that a presence like Amari Cooper can have, and an influence that he can have on a young player like Keon Coleman, who is clearly respectful, a respectful sponge that is ready to soak up everything. I think that's what we saw. We saw the immediate impact of a guy like Amari Cooper on a team that did not have a clear wide receiver one and a veteran presence to drive this offense forward. Even loving James Cook, that's not a player that you can surround and drive your offense through. Josh Allen can't do it all. You needed a guy like Amari Cooper to get in and be the leader outside of Josh Allen here. So the impact that we saw immediately, I think that carries forward. What this trade meant to the Bills, this was perfect for them. This was the exact player that they needed. Now, again, don't take the level of production on a limited snap count to mean that when he plays a full workload, he's going to have 30 fantasy points. That's not the case here. Again, it just means that they hyper targeted him when he was on the field. And that's not something that would translate to a full game. But it also does mean that he is the clear wide receiver one, and they have purpose for him in that offense. And he executed perfectly when called upon, caught 4 of his 5 targets, touchdowns. So really and truly, this was just the perfect start right here. We know that Amari Cooper can be an absolute monster when he has competent quarterback play. Look at him last week and the upside look at him last year and the upside that he had with Joe Flacco. He was a monster. So honestly, ceiling is massively high from Amari Cooper in this offense. And don't count out the possibility of guys like Keon Coleman still having fantasy value as well, as we continue to see his development within this offense. Take some more questions here because we do have one more thing to talk about, but we're making a good pace here. We have one more topic to cover here, and that is Cooper Kupp. Let's take a couple more questions, and then we've got a comment here from Scotty Knows that is going to dive perfectly into us talking about Kupp. But let's take a couple of other questions here. Should I do Pickens and Rachaad for Puka? I'm thinking about it with the Kupp trade rumors. I don't mind that trade for you. That's okay. It might feel like a lot because obviously George Pickens coming off that fantastic performance, but we do have to meet that with a level of skepticism. It was good to see Russ. Now, I hate that just from like a fan perspective. I support Justin Fields. I'm on his side because he really looked like a changed player in terms of how he was able to operate within that Pittsburgh offense. Like it was clear, like when he was in Chicago, all that problems, that was not just him. That was unfortunately the result of having poor coaching and a poor offensive line. So getting him in here in a situation where he's now on a competent team with competent coaches, with a good offensive line, you see a player that does actually have a future. That said, Russ got in immediately and showcased that, hey, remember who I was in Denver? Yeah, I'm not that person. So it was good to see that from him too. These are two redemption players that we want good things for. And him getting in there with George Pickens and having that immediate production for Pickens makes sense, because if we think about last year and the production that not Cooper Kupp, that Cortland Sutton had with Russell Wilson, yeah, it kind of very similar players, and it makes sense that this could, keep up for rest of season. It's just a matter of whether or not we think Russ is going to keep the job. And if Russ ends up, something happens and he doesn't keep the job, maybe he, has a struggle game. I almost said that in a bad way. Maybe he has a struggle game, and they decide to, try Justin out again. There's no commitment there, in my opinion. So if Justin comes back, that obviously puts George Pickens in the same position. So trading Pickens high right now, that makes sense. So I like that trade for you, Otto. Like that trade for you. Traded Devonta Smith for, I'm guessing, Marvin Harrison Jr. W trade. Yeah, I think it is. No, Marvin Harrison Jr. has had his struggles, and we got to remember it's a rookie. Kyler is, he's a good quarterback, but I think, there might be some development in terms of their connection that has to happen. The utilization of Marvin Harrison Jr. is a little bit sketchy. So, but this is a young team. It's a young coaching staff. They're still learning things, and there will be adjustments that they make as the season goes on. The good thing is that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the clear wide receiver one in that offense. Now, obviously, McBride is often, the higher targeted person just because of situational things. But while I love Michael Wilson, I don't see that as a threat to his production. So I like this. I like that trade for you. Even though I do like Devonta, I think, as we go through the back half of the season, we could have more production from Marvin Harrison. So I'm okay with that. Neighbors and CMC for Devonta and Chubb. I far prefer the Neighbors CMC side of that trade. Trade help, Kyron Williams, Tucker Kraft for T, Jason, and Pacheco. I'm okay with that. If you're a winner right now, I'm okay with that, because remember, you aren't going to be, be careful of thinking. I know we got the report that, hey, we've got Pacheco back in the locker room. That doesn't mean that he's coming back anytime soon. So just beware that if you're trading for Pacheco, there's a good chance that you won't see him towards maybe the fantasy playoffs. So just, proceed with caution that you can afford to lose Kyron Williams and not have Pacheco. So it's an even trade, but I'm very wary of that one if you don't have a running back to be in place immediately for Kyron Williams. Let's talk about the Cooper Kupp question here, and then talk about Kupp. We've got a couple Kupp questions. I'm going to read all of these Kupp questions in a row here. There we go. We got, would you trade Kupp, Devonta Smith, and Hunt for Neighbors, Olave, and Ferguson redraft? Yeah, you feels like Kupp's value goes down if he gets traded to the Steelers. It 100% does. If he goes to the Steelers, his value does tank, and you would prefer the Neighbors, Olave, Ferguson side of that. I kind of hate the Neighbors, Ferguson side of that. The Neighbors, Olave, Ferguson side of that. I love Neighbors, but I got some major problems with Olave. Olave's upside can never be that of Kupp or Devonta Smith, unfortunately. Within the confines of that offense, within the confines of, them having Spencer Rattler right now, Olave is not usable right now, is a major issue. Ferguson is also kind of a weird situation where we're looking at that Dallas offense, and I thought that he was going to be the clear second look behind CeeDee Lamb. But Jalen Tolbert, I believe in Jalen Tolbert and the way that he has stepped up, just enough to kind of push Ferguson out a little bit and be a little bit untrustworthy. So no, I actually prefer the Kupp, Devonta Smith, Hunt side of that, for reasons of thinking that I do think we're going to have Hunt through the fantasy playoffs. Now, that said, it is risky for sure. It is risky for sure, because you could get in a situation where Kupp is traded to the Steelers, but My preference there is crossing our fingers that I do think we're going to get Kupp to Tampa Bay. Let's do one more question here, and then I'll explain why. Cooper Kupp, worried about the injury and potential trade him for Jaden Reed, or I can get them Reed and Brian Thomas, or just yeah. Or if you're saying that you could get Reed and Brian Thomas. Okay, so to clarify for the podcast, the trade would either be Kupp straight up for Reed, or see if they could get both Reed and Brian Thomas. I don't know if someone would. I mean, if you could get someone to do that, you have swindled them. I would absolutely do them for sure. That's a whole lot there. If someone would do that, I would jump in a heartbeat. Now, Kupp for Reed straight up, I don't mind that. That said, again, I like the possibility of Kupp going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but Jaden Reed is again someone that we have seen high upside. I know it's been disappointing recently. I know it has, but that's a very even trade there, in my opinion. Now, talking about Cooper Kupp specifically. I know it's weird because we got that weird Stafford rumor that we don't know if that's legit or not, but the Kupp potential trade, that's real. The Rams are shopping him around, and I just wanted to like solidify the trade. I do believe it's going to happen. I do believe it's going to happen here. And obviously, I think the Rams having a Thursday night game kind of puts that in a weird position here where they maybe couldn't get the trade through in time. But when we're looking here at the Rams, they're currently last place in the NFC West. And no one's dominating that division. But if you just kind of look at the overall landscape of the NFC, there's no realistic possibility. And the Rams are very smart enough to realize that even if we get, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua healthy, their chances of being able to compete in the playoffs are slim. They haven't made significant improvements from last year. And there's a reason for that. Obviously, they lost Aaron Darnold. They've had to try and replace that. It's been an up and down process for them. Their defense is very vulnerable. It's not in the same place that it has been in the past. And they know that they're young, right? And we look at their offensive line. They tried to solve that issues. They've been going through some struggles as well. So overall, I think they recognize that they're just not in a place to compete with teams like Detroit and Green Bay, two teams that have beaten them this year. Unfortunately, they've been close games. Like, they're not getting blown out. This is not a destitute situation. But when you've lost repeatedly to these guys that you will be facing in the playoffs, then you have to account for San Francisco, Seattle's doing well, Minnesota as well. It's just kind of a struggle situation for them to where they're like, okay, we need to reset and prepare for next year. They clearly like Jordan Whittington and would see the opportunity for him to continue his development if Kupp is gone. They'll probably be searching for a new quarterback next year as well, even if that trade rumor is not true. We know that there's a time limit on Stafford. We saw the contract adjustment, so we kind of got the writing on the wall there that they'll be seeking new quarterback in the future. So the Kupp trade does make sense, and I feel like they're going to push for it to happen. We've got multiple potential trade partners here. We talked about the possibility of him going to Pittsburgh. That would be a disaster from a fantasy perspective. I cannot express how frustrated I would be as a Cooper Kupp fantasy manager if that happened. Yes, Russ looked fantastic last week, but they are not a team by design that is going to be lighting it up through the air to two receivers to the point where we can trust them both as top 10 receivers. That's not going to happen. That's not their team identity. And we know that they want to make that wide receiver addition to solidify their receiving room, but that's not going to change. Even if they add a receiver, they're not going to change their offensive philosophy. It's just solidifying their core for that playoff push, because they clearly believe, and I do think so, they are actually, potentially a contender. They're always yearly a team that is going to make it into the playoffs towards the end, but this is the first year where, in a while that you're looking at them and you're like, well, it could be a little more. I can see where you could compete. I can see that because your defense is on fire. You're healthy. Yeah, I can see that. So them adding a receiver just kind of puts them in a better position to push forward. But from a fantasy perspective, that just wouldn't work for us. There's not enough volume to go around for what we expect out of Cooper Kupp. Where I want to see Cooper Kupp is in Tampa Bay. We know Chris Godwin is out for the year. We know that Mike Evans is sidelined until after their bye week. They said they're not putting him on IR. They said it's a 3-week timeline. They know that they get the extra week because after the 3 weeks are up, they have their bye week. So if they did put him on IR, they would have the 3 games, the bye week, and then a game on top of that. That's just way too long to risk it. So that's why they're not putting him on IR. So when we're looking at this team needing for 3-game period here, they need a wide receiver. It just makes the most logical sense. And this again is another Sean McVay has put all his little offshoots, all his little former offensive coordinators all over the place. And this is another one here in Tampa Bay. This is a McVay offense. So if we saw Cooper Kupp go into Tampa Bay right now and fulfill the role that Chris Godwin had, my God. Yeah, he can absolutely do that. It would be beautiful. It's perfect for him. That is the ideal situation. I'm willing it in my heart to happen here. Because while I like Jalen McMillan, we've got a lot of trade questions for Jalen McMillan and the potential there. They just need to. They're a true competitor. Baker Mayfield is dealing. For them to just sit here and forego that and say, we're going to try and rely on what we've got, doesn't make a lot of sense for me. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's get back here to the questions, though, because we've got a ton more coming in. Drake Maye or Sam Darnold? I prefer Sam Darnold. And while I love Drake Maye and the promise that he has, sorry, little cough there. I love Drake Maye and the promise that he has shown thus far. I'm a little bit skeptical of this matchup here. The Jets defense has obviously tailed off. We talked about it earlier. They have tailed off since the exit of Robert Saleh, the unwarranted, unfortunate exit of Robert Saleh, and now they're getting their defensive karma. So Drake Maye could obviously take advantage of this situation and still put up strong fantasy numbers. He's got the rushing upside. He could throw some touchdowns, a little interceptions here and there. It is what it is. Like, it's okay. It's okay. But at the same time, they should be getting Hassan Reddick back. I feel like that's a potential for them to kind of pull things together here. It's a risk. So that said, I lean towards just being a lot safer there and going with Sam Darnold. Just going ahead and starting him. LA Rams defense, I just talked about. They're young. They're struggling. They have been vulnerable through the air. So this is a good top 10 situation for Sam Darnold here. So we could get a nice little Sam Darnold bounce back week here. Not that last week was terrible, but we haven't, even prior to the bye week against the Jets, it was a bad situation. So I'm trusting this is a good bounce back matchup for him. DeAndre Hopkins or Nick Chubb? That's an interesting one. I lean towards, now we have Jameis starting, so the offense could flow a little bit more and Chubb could have, obviously it'll open things up a little bit for Chubb. We didn't see that last week. I lean towards going with Nick Chubb or DeAndre Hopkins. I see a couple more questions on DeAndre Hopkins. I'm okay with starting DeAndre Hopkins. If they say he's going to play, I'm okay with starting it. Again, it could look very similar to the Amari Cooper situation where he's limited, but when he's on the field, it is with the purpose of him running routes and being targeted. So it's, purposeful usage. So I'm okay with starting DeAndre Hopkins right off the bat if he's active. But again, Chubb is the preference there for me. Would you trade Tank Dell for Rico Dowdle? Interesting. My new team would be Henry, Dowdle, Ramondre, Pacheco, Lamb, Dobbs, Odunze, Keon Coleman. Yeah, I would not. And it's that I'm okay with you trading Tank Dell because we do know what this offense looks like when Nico Collins is healthy, and it's not good for Tank Dell. And we do know that Tank Dell has been struggling lately. But if you can try to get something a little bit better than Rico Dowdle, I would aim for that. I don't mind it if you want to make that trade because you need somebody to be a reliable RB2 right now. Ramondre is obviously dealing with an injury. So if you want to make that trade, I don't think it's a loss. It's an even trade overall when we're looking at the scope of the season as a whole. That said, I would try to aim a little bit higher at running back if you can, just based off the fact that, again, we've got Nico on IR. So I like this as a nice bounce back week for Tank Dell as well. Start DeAndre Hopkins over Najee. No, I wouldn't. Over the past couple of weeks, Najee has been a little bit more reliable, especially last week. I mean, he's just... We always think, okay, Jalen Warren's going to step in. He's going to take over a little bit more. And I'm guilty of that. Like I've defended Najee in the past, but I've been very frustrated with his production earlier in the season. But as of recent, Najee has looked better, beginning to have just a little bit more trust in him. I would lean that direction over taking that initial risk with Hopkins. So the recent usage and production for Najee has been fantastic. The Giants are not an easy matchup. That's the only thing that kind of makes me hesitant there. Their defense has been okay. Their defense has been holding it down all season long. So this is not a layup matchup, but I do still think that he is a strong play at RB2 with low-end RB1 upside here. So I would go with Najee. Would you start Rachaad White? Yeah, let's talk about that real quick here because we talked about the potential of a trade for Cooper Kupp to Tampa Bay. That is obviously not going to happen this week unless we get some like a trade tomorrow before the game. That could happen. But in all likelihood, Tampa Bay will be rolling without an additional receiver this week. And what does that mean for their receiving core as a whole? It does mean that guys like the younger guys like Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer have to step up. We're going to see a little bit more usage out of Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard is potentially back on the table. But really what I see here is I do think that these running backs are going to get an uptick in volume through the air. When we look at that Tampa Bay, I chuckled last week. I don't know if I said it on this podcast last week because I don't know if it was out yet when I did the podcast, but I made some jokes last week about Todd Bowles calling their backfield a three-headed monster because, is it a monster? No, but it is three-headed. They are, oh, thank you for the heart. Appreciate that. But when we're looking at this Bucs backfield, we can make jokes about it all we want, but the reality is that they straight up have three down backs. They have three down backs that are excellent pass catchers. For all the struggles Rachaad White has on the ground, he's a very strong receiver. Bucky Irving, strong receiver. Trey Tucker has hands. So when we're looking at how this offense moves forward, there might be increased usage from the running backs through the air, which would definitely make Rachaad White continually viable. So I don't mind starting Rachaad White this week, just based on the fact that I do think that there's going to be an uptick in volume. I don't mind starting Rachaad White. I don't mind starting Bucky Irving. I'm not there with Sean Tucker yet, just because I do think he's taken the clear, back seat in terms of being the third in this offense, but his promise for the future, I feel good about. Our little once dynasty darling. I have so many. No, I say I have so many. I dumped all my Sean Tucker shares except for one dynasty league that is stupid deep, where there's 3 starting running backs. That's a nightmare. 3 starting running backs and like 6 starting receivers. Like that's crazy. It's fun though. But that's the only team where I've held on to my little Sean Tucker share there. But those running backs are going to see an uptick in production there. So yeah, I'm comfortable with starting both White and Bucky Irving this week. From Beebs in the Trap. Need a dub this week. Ferg or Mandrews at tight end. That's the first part of it. I'm okay with Mark Andrews. Now, we do have to remember that his increase in usage definitely is situational. Don't think that all of a sudden we've gone back to Mark Andrews is just super trustable or trustable. That's not a word. Super trustworthy. He's going to be a top 5 guy. No, we're coming off of 2 games here where They were playing Washington and Tampa Bay. We've talked about Tampa Bay's defense being a complete layup. Washington is more of a kind of interesting situation, but there's not a ton of volume there for Mark Andrews. So I'm still kind of wary of Mark Andrews. I'm not anointing him back to the Mark Andrews that he was before, but I am trusting him a little bit more than Jake Ferguson. My rankings don't reflect that right now. And that's just a weird, that's a weird rankings thing. But my preference there in terms of the guy that I think does have the most upside is going to be Mark Andrews. Jake Ferguson has me a tiny bit worried because we saw heavy production for him back before the Cowboys kind of increased utilization of Jalen Tolbert. So Jake Ferguson's volume was really the benefit of him being the second option in the receiving core. If that's not the case anymore and they're pivoting more towards Jalen Tolbert, we could see more games, unfortunately, that look like the last game where he woefully underperformed. He was tight end 29.5 PPR. And this is another difficult matchup against San Francisco. So I am a little bit wary of that. I don't mind this matchup in terms of Cleveland from a perspective of a tight end. So I'm okay with going with Andrews over Jake Ferguson this week. Do a couple more questions here and then we'll call it a day because I've got some kids to get to bed. Thoughts on Ray Davis? That's a good one there for us to do. Thoughts on Ray Davis is that he will never have enough volume to where we'll feel super comfortable starting him, but he will have enough volume to where he really caps that upside for James Cook. I think his production is real. I think his talent is real. I know, some people might be skeptical, but this was a guy in pre-draft process where there were some analysts that were pretty high on him. It happened with him and Bucky Irving and Braylon Allen. After Blake Corum and Jonathan Brooks, I mean, I feel like people kind of went back and forth on who really truly had the most upside. And Ray Davis was a guy that a lot of people did really like. I think that he'll continue to be involved. We also have to consider that Ty Johnson will continue to have a couple catches here and there, which is frustrating because we would like those to go to one of the other running backs. But Ray Davis is someone who is a high upside handcuff. We want to roster him because if anything were to happen to James Cook, we know that we're getting an RB1. Then production will be there, but he won't be usable on a weekly basis. We just gotta skip. All right. We'll do one question here. That's okay. We'll do one more question here. It's a longer question, and then we'll close things out here. Would you trade CD, Rome, and Bateman for Gibbs, Chuba, and Kirk? My new team would be Henry, Gibbs, Pacheco, Chuba, Ramondre, Tank Dell, Dobbs, Keon Coleman. It is a little bit confusing because so you would have, okay, no, I get it. It's just because you didn't have Kirk in there, but I assume Kirk would be on the bench. I'm okay with that trade. But the problem there is that you're very light at wide receiver. Tank Dell, once Nico Collins comes back, is going to go down to being someone that we barely trust as a flex option, to be quite frank. I worry for you if you make this trade and you lose CD. I get the upgrade at running back is critical, and I know that you're reeling there without Pacheco. Probably worried about your RB2 there long term, but losing CD could really, really hurt your team right there. So I would not make that trade. I don't think you can afford to give up CD. I like Romeo Dobbs, but ultimately Tank Dell is going to be a liability there for you as your wide receiver one. So I would not make that trade for you. But that's it, guys. Let's wrap it up there. I appreciate you all joining in. No, I see a couple more. I want to be fair. I'll do these really quick. Start Jawan Jennings or Tank Dell. I would start Tank Dell. I get, I like Jawan Jennings, but I think this is a nice opportunity for a bounce back week for Tank Dell. Last week was very, very weird. And then I think this one is just a comment in terms of a best ball team. Best ball mania. All right. Let's close things out. Oh, I got a nice little gift over there. Let's do one more question there. I appreciate that. I got Bijan for Flowers, McLaurin, Mayfield, Mason, still have Hall, Dobbins, Hill, Kyler, Adams. Yeah, I'm okay with that trade. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot to give up for Bijan, but we finally have seen that overall RB1 type of upside for Bijan. Baker Mayfield, you're throwing in a quarterback. That's cool. But ultimately, quarterbacks are always kind of a wash in trades because in one QB leagues, you can literally stream and get anybody. Mason could obviously go down significantly in value when CMC comes back. So it's a lot. It is a lot, but I don't mind that trade for you, kind of solidifying your running back room there. Because obviously having Dobbins is a little bit risky. We don't know long-term in terms of his injury. Unfortunately, his injury history. So Bijan and Breece Hall, that strength at running back, I think that is absolutely wonderful. All right. I'm going to wrap things up, guys. I appreciate everything. I saw lots of gifts, so I appreciate that too. Thank you so much. Your questions were all wonderful. I don't know next time I'll be live, but make sure that you are following me so you get the notifications when I go live. I'll try to go live one other time this week before we get the Sunday games, just so I can answer some more questions. Yeah, Timmy, I'll answer your question real quick before we go. Breece Hall for Chubb, Deontay, who wins? Breece Hall, 100% side of that. Again, we've got Andy Dalton. We don't know a ton about Andy Dalton's thumb injury. It happened in a car crash. We don't have a lot of details on it. We don't know for sure when he would be back right now. Again, Chubb in the Cleveland offense is a little bit risky, so I would far prefer to have Breece. I talked about him being really the big beneficiary there from the Adams trade. Just really opening up goal line opportunities for him. But that wraps things up. I got to go, guys. I got a couple of kids to get off to bed here. I appreciate you all joining in. The questions were wonderful as always. You guys are amazing. Thank you for tuning in. That wraps things up. As a reminder, be sure that you're subscribed to my podcast on all platforms if you're not already subscribed, and make sure that you're also subscribed to Player Profiler as well. The podcast is through the Player Profiler Network. And if you're in the mood for more subscriptions, you can always subscribe to me on YouTube or follow on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. Everything is It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME, pretty much everywhere. Other than that, I appreciate you all tuning in. Good luck with your lineups. If you have any questions that I didn't get to, because I know there were a ton that I didn't get to, best place to ask me questions, honestly, is to tag me on Twitter. I get the notifications immediately. And if I don't get to it immediately, they're always sitting there. It's so easy to miss comments on video. So Twitter is the easiest place for me to, you just tag me and I can get to it. I scroll down my notifications and just see if anyone has asked me any questions. So if you have any questions that you need answered before the Thursday night games, that's the best way to do it. Outside of that, appreciate you all joining in. I will talk to you next week. Thank you very much, guys. Okay. Oh, I need to